what we know can kind of detract from what we're trying to learn. So I said a while ago we left off in the middle of 3 points. And if we're not careful, the reason why we were talking about these 3 points, if we're not careful, we can see ourselves in these 3 points. And that's kind of what I want to finish up, and then we're going to move into a couple of other things. So right at the end of the class last week, we looked at the fact that David in his life, as he had, we looked at a couple of different Psalms, and we ended up in Psalm 51, right after his sin with Bathsheba. And we saw a very low point in his life, and we kind of want to talk about, hey, when we reach low points in our lives, are there things that we can compare ourselves with regards to David and see? But one of the things we were talking about right at the end of the class was that David no longer had to struggle, right? The struggle in life kind of occupies our time, and we were talking about that. It occupies our headspace, and we're trying to achieve something. Usually it's a better frame of mind, a better way to live, and a better relationship with God. But we looked at a couple of things with David and his struggle, right? David was undersized. We talked about these things, right? He worked in the pastures with sheep. He was a shepherd. He stood up to Goliath. I mean, all throughout his life, from the beginning to the point in time where he sinned with Bathsheba, you could see that he was continually moving forward, and he's continually always had some sort of struggle in his life or things that were kind of making him work. But all the struggles that he had in his life helped him to do what? And we talked about this last week. What did it help him do? I usually throw out the easy questions first. Okay, trust in God. So what does that help David do, though, by increasing his trust in God? What is that a measurement of? I'm sorry? Faith, okay. I was looking for the word maturity, right? These struggles in David's life help him mature because God's not done with him yet, so God's helping him down this path, right? And we talked about that. Because at the point when he wrote Psalm 51, right prior to that, you could say that David, and we talked about this right at the end of the class, where he was like on top of the world. Was he not? Was he king? King of God's chosen people? That's kind of being like on top of the world at that point in time. And so one of the things about that is, hey, having gained all of that, a kingdom, a bunch of wives, servants, and all the authority that came with that, life really became easy for David. Did it not? So here's, I told you, the question is going to get a little harder. How can we as individuals relate to that? How can we relate to that? Think about us as individuals. Where are you today? No one was here? Ed?
Well, when you've gone through struggles, it makes you rely more on God, as you mentioned. Get through it and have the opportunity to look back. You can have a better perspective of where God has helped you through it versus when you're in the middle of it.
Okay.
So you learn from that. So when the next time something happens, you learn how to have a little more trust and turn things over to Him.
Okay.
Sometimes you can't do anything about it.
Yeah. How many shepherds do we have in the room this morning? We have any shepherds in the room? No. Look around the room. You know your friends and your neighbors and our family here. You know kind of what we do for a living. Right? We have one. But the point is, where we are, if you look around the room this morning and you look across, right? We're not struggling like maybe some others would in the world today. If you've visited or heard and seen other countries, there are a lot of places in the world that are a lot more struggle than where we are today in America. So one of the things that we can find ourselves falling kind of into this little rut or this period is, just like David, we can become a little bit complacent in what we're doing because we believe that we have arrived. Right? So sometimes as a Christian, we can feel that way too. Okay? You know, we can go into the water and be baptized. We can come out and we have Jesus that helps cleanse us so we can stand before God. So we feel like, I crossed the finish line, I'm done. But yet the rest of our life still is in front of us, and so we can become complacent. So think about how we can relate to David's situation here when he was struggling, and finally became king. Life became a little easier for him because he had people now that would do things for him. And you can see now where maybe David can get a little more relaxed. So what happens when we kind of, for lack of a better description, hey, when you guys go on vacation, what's your schedule like? Do you pay attention as much? Or are you there to relax and unplug? Right? So think about that and the contribution to what we're going to talk about in the next couple of things as we talk about that. All right? Because what did we say about struggle? And Ed talked about it in his comment. Consider that to be like a wake-up call or a jolt to us, that maybe we needed to be kind of shook. Because maybe our focus isn't what it should be. Maybe it's just what we need to better understand what we should be doing versus what we are doing. And maybe we need to understand that our reliance should be upon God and put our faith there rather than what are we going to achieve or where are we going. Okay? Because if we think we are doing okay and we think we have arrived, where is God? Usually. Do we usually put him in the back seat? Yeah. All right. So the first thing was David really didn't have to struggle. The second point that we were going to talk about last week was David chose to be alone. If you think about the time right before the sin with Bathsheba, where was he in relationship to everyone else? He was at home. Where was everybody else? At war. Okay? So he chose to be alone. Okay? So not only was David living the luxury life, he was by himself. He unplugged. You've probably heard the saying at some point in your life, and if you haven't, and I'll be shocked if you haven't heard this one, it's lonely at the top. It's lonely at the top. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? David chose to be by himself. The other kings were out to battle. He stayed back while his mighty men, including Bathsheba's husband and father, were all gone. They're all away fighting. David was home alone. So think about that. In today's context, if this is our family and we choose to stay away, or we choose to be home alone, what usually happens?
I get the expression, idle hands are the devil's work.
Okay? It's exactly kind of where my head goes. When Jonna can confirm this, right? When I get bored, I usually get in trouble. Right? The struggle is real most of the time, but when there is no struggle, what happens? We start to wander and do things we probably shouldn't do. Not saying I go walking on my roof and looking over and seeing other men's wives, but what I'm saying is I'll do dumb stuff. And I'll get the the shaking of the head, wondering, what did you just do? But this was his choice, okay? He chose to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Remember, but just remember who he was. He was king. He was king. Who was going to keep him in check? Okay? So we as individuals, who are we in charge of? Who are we king or queen over? Ourselves. Yeah. We're the king. We're the queen. Okay? While he was alone, he conceived a plan, and nobody was there to keep him from doing it. Think about that. And he thought he could hide it and that nobody would know. Lisa?
Well, as you go over all that stuff, it makes me think of how accountability is really a friend to us. Even though we don't want anybody to tell us not to do something with it, why would you think of going there or whatever? It is, and of course, he didn't have to worry about that kind of thing, but it is such a fine line where you can fall right off the cliff
Yeah.
without having any accountability, you know?
Yeah.
And thankfully, we care enough, hopefully, about each other to,
Yeah. Did Ryan just not do, Ryan just did a class or a sermon on Am I My Brother's Keeper, right? So you see here, we should be looking out for one another, but us as individuals, do we really like being told what to do? No. None of us do. None of us do. Okay? But of course, in David's choice, right, we're just walking through the story here, just from a little different perspective. Of course, who saw it? Who saw what all was unfolding and going on? Who's always there? God. Who are we accountable to? God. Who's always there? Do we forget that? God saw it. God sent Nathan to him. And Nathan called him out. Right? Nathan was took the long way around the barn to call him out. He didn't just get in his face and point his finger and, do that, but basically told him a story. Said, hey, what do you think about this? And David was enraged. Okay? But that's where you get to the flip of the coin when David found out it was himself. Right? We'll talk about that later in today's class, but let's finish talking about what had just happened. The first domino had just fallen, and now the avalanche of payback is about to occur. And that's my phraseology. Because the choice David made, because he was not struggling, for whatever reason he chose, and he chose to be alone and do the wrong thing, now has consequences that will live with him for a very long time. For a very long time. The ripple effect has just started. Right? And this ripple effect and these consequences will impact David's daily life for years to come. That accountability, we're accountable to God. Do we realize that? And then when things come to us, do we forget what we did? It doesn't absolve from the pain, right? It doesn't absolve us from the pain, okay? I mean, just look at the impact of David's decisions had on other people. Forget him for a second. Just the thing that he did. Think of the ripple effect. Who all did it impact? mean, of course you have Bathsheba, but who all did it impact?
His own children, kingdom, whole.
I mean, you start looking at just one thing. Kind of affected Uriah and the family, the kingdom, David's family caused more death and destruction. Do we really think? So here's a reflective question. Please don't answer. But it's one of those reflective questions that I threw in the middle of my lesson. Do we really think that our decisions that we make don't impact the family when we make them? Think about that for a second. Benny?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, Madeline, of course, didn't go to Florida College, May 2nd. But through, like, my nieces and my nephew going to Florida College, I know so many names, and maybe through camp friends coming to Lisa's house, I've met so many children and people over the years. But something can happen to somebody that I don't have that direct relationship with, and I know them. That just shows how the effect, how knowing them, even though I don't know them, that's how it.
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes sense, but
there's a ripple effect
yeah.
for the decisions that we make, right? What's interesting is we may unknowingly impact other people in the family by decisions that we make, that we may think in our own minds are okay. So as we think through this, the ripple effect of the things that we do and our impact, think of it as a boat going through a lake. You're cutting a wake. The wake just doesn't stop and stay 10 feet apart. It moves. So it's kind of an interesting thought. Because David, he obviously didn't have a crystal ball that he could see the future and see all the destruction before he made the decision. But he was going to have to live out the remainder of his days knowing that he caused this to unfold. He did. Okay? And that's interesting for us to know. We can relate to that. Decisions that we make have consequences. Okay? They do. Some of us may believe we can walk our path alone. We think we can go do our thing, be by ourselves. No one will know. Sounds a lot like where David was. No one will know what I'm doing. I won't tell anybody. I'll just try to pretend like it didn't happen. Come on. I'll send somebody's husband to the front, let him get killed, and no one will be none the wiser. That's not what we do, but we try to do the same thing, just in different ways. Right? You probably know this object lesson, right? It's really simple. The single stick versus the bundle of sticks. Break one stick, it's really easy to break. The bundle of sticks is a lot harder to break. And sometimes it's unbreakable. There are strength in numbers. Okay? This is exactly why it's imperative for us to be part of a family, a church family. Satan can pick us off individually, one by one. There's a reason why, if you watch in nature, the predators cut a single member of the herd off at a time. They can't fight the whole herd, but they can fight the individual. Kevin?
Yeah, when you had mentioned earlier, I thought of 1 Peter 5, where he talks about the devil prowls around like a roaring lion. And so I had flipped there to see what else, what the context was in addition. But it's that concept of the devil looks for who's isolated, and that's who is targeted. But that led me to thinking about how we're
sounds easy when I respond, but it's awfully hard. So I'll caveat my response to that. So here's the easy answer. Are you really alone? You're never alone, right? There's an omni word. There's an omni word, omnipresent. God is always here. Got 1 second. He's always with us. And to your point, we should cast these things and have that relationship with him and develop that faith that we have that he is always with us. Usually when we find these choices that we make, we forget where God is. And God is with us. I have Lisa and then Becky.
Well, and many times we forget what we really do when we're in a predicament. And going back to the, whatever you're talking about with us getting in trouble or decisions, whatever, sorry, I can't think right now, but a lot of it has to do with if we don't examine ourselves daily, then I'm more apt to be in a position to make a poor decision because maybe I'm sliding down a slope of whatever, I don't know, emotional thing, whatever. And before you know it, you've made a decision that affects your children, your husband, and of course it's more far-reaching than that, but there's so many things that go together that we forget. It really only can start with us and remembering, if we get emotional about this, we're never going to make a good decision. Or if we get mad about it, all of it goes together so much.
Yeah. So, I'll be right there. So here's one thing I want to pull out on that, right? I watched a lot of the national news lately. There are news stories, okay, about a particular topic that I find rather interesting, not because I'm for or against it, but it's just an interesting topic. But to your point, if we don't examine ourselves daily, if we put ourselves on autopilot, what usually takes in, right? Our human nature just takes in, and our primal responses usually come out, okay? Which is not necessarily the way that God instructs us to do things. So one of the things I've been watching a lot of is, hey, automatic driving cars. It's all over the news right now. But they were zipping down a runway, and the car was just zigging out in between the lines, and everything was great and wonderful till they got to the end of the pavement. And the guy goes, what's going to happen when we get to the end of the pavement? There's no more lines. The lady driving behind the wheel of the car who's doing the testing, she goes, well, let's just find out what happens. It didn't stop. It went off into the grass, went off-road. It should have stopped because the pavement stopped. So think about that. If we put ourselves on autopilot and we don't grab the wheel, we might end up in the ditch. So if you think about it in those terms, that's where that checking yourself daily, what am I really doing? And I don't know that and that's kind of where my class started from at the beginning of this year. I said, hey, what am I really doing? A lot of self-reflection, a lot of beating myself up in front of the mirror. Becky.
I was just thinking that Satan knows that need we have for connection too, and he is always ready with a group that will accept you in your current sinful state. I was just talking to a mom last night whose son is struggling with homosexuality, and she said, he talked to a counselor, and she said, that group will accept anyone, and they will, as long as it's not somebody that says, this is wrong, we can't do this. So he knows that we're made that way too, and he is against us.
Yeah. So interesting thing about that, made me think real quick. Scientifically, we're like, 75, 80% water? What does water do? What does water find? The path of least resistance. So when you look at things, do we look for the path of least resistance, or do we look for the path that we're supposed to be on? So when you think about things like that, the path that we're supposed to be on, you can see how we can relate to David. Usually the path we're going to be on, we were told it's going to be a struggle. It's not going to be free and easy. Never has been for anyone before us, nor will it be after us. But yeah, if we seek the path of least resistance, we're going to end up in the ditch. Go ahead.
Yeah, I look at this whole example of David, where he was, where he should have been, all those things. The choice he made with Bathsheba, the lying, the trying to cover it up, all those things. And I look at my own life, and I know when I go off course, it's because my focus is solely like on myself. It's how is everything impacting me? What do I want? How do I get what I want? Circle right back around to then, how is everything impacting me? And I need to, in some way, express that, how everything is impacting me. Negatively, it's never positively. That's what comes out when I go off course. So I think when I look at David and I feel like maybe his focus it wasn't on God. It wasn't on where does God want me to be right now? What does God want me to be focused on right now? He had let that in my mind. He had let that slip because I see that in myself, like a lot lately. I have let that focus be on me.
Yeah. David was weaker alone because he had taken his focus, and I'll say this, he had put God kind of in the back seat because he had arrived. He was king. 1 second. If it's a quick one, go ahead, because I got a whole third point I need to get to.
Back to Abigail, as she was talking, it made me think of, why can't I be like Abigail more, where the whole thing was a mess, the husband, the whole schmear, and she takes it like, she's got a lasso, and she's like, I'm gonna go forward and do something that a lot of men would never have the bravery to do. I'm going up against this king, all the guys he's bringing, I'm gonna try to help, well, talk some sense into your life. I kind of look at
Yeah.
it like that, but even though he might be right in wanting to come take out my husband, it's phenomenal to me.
Yep.
How much she stayed outside of herself, where it'd be real easy, kind of what John is saying, to focus on, well, my husband is terrible to me, I'm just gonna let him come and ignore it and see what happens, or, there's so much good that is in a lot of that if you really take the whole story to heart.
Yeah, I think we can find good if we look for the good. But sometimes, let's be objective and honest, sometimes we like to be the victim. Sometimes we like to be the victim. Right? We do. I don't say that lightly. Sometimes we do. Because what do we get when we're the victim, right? We get attention. The things that are human nature things, our selfish inner being gets stroked. So sometimes it's hard. But that's why we learn. That's why we train. That's why we do things. That's why we see things. And then the flip of that would be, there are such great examples where people have done tremendous things. We don't have to do tremendous things. We don't have to, they call us, at work all the time, we say, don't boil the ocean. Don't try to boil the ocean. Just try to do your part. Do what you can. A cup of cold water. Do what you can. Don't try to do the whole, because then next time you can do a little bit more, and then a little bit more. As we train and as we learn and as we go forward, that's how we learn. We build upon what we already know. But David was weaker alone. He was weaker. And he was not where he should have been. which leads me to the third point that I think relates to us. Right? The first one relates to us, I think. We don't struggle as much. If you think back 10 years in your life, you probably struggled more 10 years ago than you do now. You probably did. All fairness. The second point was, hey, sometimes we put ourselves and we choose to put ourselves in the wrong places. Right? We choose to be alone sometimes. The third one, David just planned to fail. He just planned to fail. And what do I mean by that? I mean, some of you, may have heard the phrase, hey, if you fail to plan, you've planned to fail, or vice versa. If you don't have a plan in place, you don't really know where you're going. Okay? Think back to what Abraham did when he said he offered up Isaac, and the word that was used there meant what? You remember? We had two sub-meanings. One, purposeful in intent. Abraham set his mind. Insert planned. And he was going to execute his plan because he had purpose and intent to offer up Isaac as God commanded. Okay? In David's case, he failed to plan and then he just failed. Right? Why? David was alone, not where he should have been, not seeking to do the will of God, and he lost focus on the battle at hand. So think about that. He got relaxed. He got complacent. You can start to see where this now starts to kind of color inside the sketch of the lines. Because of all that, when he stepped out onto that roof and he saw what he saw, he sent and inquired of the woman. That's in 2 Samuel chapter 11. The inquiry was not the point of no return. Right? Wasn't the point of no return. He then found out she was the wife of one of his mighty men, and he made the conscious choice to go further and have her brought. Okay? He abused his authority as a king because he was alone. One might insert bored. He was bored. We don't really know why he was on the roof. We don't really know why he was there, but I kind of would just look at this and, thinking about it as it relates to us, me. Hey, I just got bored. He thought he could keep it was private because everyone was gone. Right? What do we do when we're not around anybody? What do we do when we're alone? I don't really want to know. But that is the crux of the matter for us today. What do we do when we're alone? When no one else is around? David knew what he was doing, and it was evil in the sight of the Lord. 2 Samuel chapter 11 and verse 27. It took Nathan coming to David for him to recognize. Think about that. It took someone shaking him, waking him up, jolting him, to get him to recognize what had just happened. Yeah. Sure.
I was just thinking about this. We have this teenager, and her track. There's no kids in here, so unfortunately, I kind of wish they could hear this, but no offense to them, but her track record with me is pretty pitiful, and she would like to keep Henry and his mate babysitting Thomas since I was pregnant, and I was just the other day sitting in church, really frustrated still, and I'm like, if she only knew how much I don't trust her character behind closed doors from what she has already portrayed. I mean, I don't think it would be be a wake-up call to her, because I just don't think she can get outside of herself enough.
Yeah.
Because she's very self-consumed. And I know everything I'm saying sounds beyond judgmental, but it's just been a trial that her parents have had with her. And it's just kind of heartbreaking, because now she's going forward, and then soon she'll be 20 in the next few years, and then that's gonna go off and be a part of the Lord's church, we're just gonna lose her. And that's just a
Yeah.
wake-up call to me to think, I would never want anyone to think they don't trust my character behind closed doors with
Yes.
something that's precious to them. You know, to me,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my word, but to her, she's done so many things, I'm like, honey, you got it all messed up.
Yeah.
And she's.
So here's my soapbox for here's my weekly social media unplugged comment. Right? Here's my social media unplugged comment, right? Boy, I can make my Facebook, my Instagram, I can make everything look really, 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 really good. Because I took a marketing class in college. I have a graphic artist friend that could give me some really cool stuff. And I can make my life seem like it is something that is truly not, because, man, Photoshop, I can edit some photos. I can make myself look really good. But it ain't real, okay? Because here's what the problem is, right? You ever seen these people's Facebook posts and these Facebook things that they put out there? And then all of a sudden, when you talk to them live and in person, the fruit that comes out of them is like nowhere near this. One of them's a lie. The thing that you get live is probably not the lie, but they fabricated what they want you to think that they're about, and that this is what you should think, regardless of what they do. David had consequences for his actions. We have consequences for ours. The fruit that we bear, if it's poisonous, we own that. We do. David owns his. I own mine. Facebook makes it easy because we can hide behind a screen, right? We can hide behind a screen and we can bully, in all honesty, with we think is some form of anonymity, but I know different. Based upon the nature of what I do for a living, I know different, and it never goes away. You post a picture, you post something out there, it never goes away. Don't think just because you go take it down that it goes away. It never goes away. So that's my public service announcement for those folks that want to post stuff out on the internet. It never goes away. Have one over here, Dave, and then Jenny.
See an interesting parallel with how God comes to David through a friend with God's word, and then how God comes to Cain directly and gives him the warning. It's given him that shaking wake-up call, and yet the responses are completely different. Yes, they both bear the consequences of their sins, but God is after the heart of the matter despite all the consequences, and he's wanting David to see that and be transformed by that, even though
Yep.
the ripple effect is already taken.
Yeah. David will have consequences, but yeah, God still wants David to understand what happened and where we're going now. Jenny.
I was just thinking about how amazing it is when David is told what he's done wrong. Well, one of the things I'm really scared about is sometimes you can listen to people talking and you can tell that what they're complaining about or what they see wrong in another person is actually something that they do. And it's really scary. In myself, so many times I thought, if I got this right, or am I one of those people that's really blind and I can't see, that I'm completely missing something in myself. And that's kind of what I see in David. He's gone through all these steps, and he even had an amazing, Uriah sounds like a great person, a great character. He was willing to do all these things that were sacrificial for his men and his king, and even, him wronging such a good person wasn't even a wake-up call enough for him to, but then it was neat because then Nathan comes and he tells him this story in this perfect way to help his mind open up and see. And it's just the coolest thing, because in Proverbs, this is the first place I think of, but God tells us many times in Proverbs, or a handful of times that, you know, to correct a foolish man hates correction, but a wise man loves it. And it does still seem like David still has some wisdom, you know, because he appreciates that he came to him and told him that, and he's really sorrowful about it, but, I mean, he still did verbal things, but it's just really scary that we could all be that person. That's why we need each other, iron sharpens iron, you know. We need each other, otherwise we keep living in sin because we haven't taken time out to help correct one another.
Yeah, you're segueing into my next week's class, but that's good. We're going to talk about David's response, right? Right now we're talking about, hey, can you see yourself in David, right? And so one of the things I want to pull on just 1 second is, hey, something you said. I see things, you know, or I, Stuart, sees things in other people. And I'm watching them unfold, and I'm seeing all this stuff. Why do I think I see that so much? So number one, why do you think I see that so much? I have an answer for that. My answer is real simple. Maybe I see that in someone else because that's who I am. Not that I'm being judgmental, but I do the same thing, and I'm really good at it, so I can spot it in others. So we have to be careful when looking through that lens too, is that when we look at others and we start to see, hey, that person does X, that person does Y, this person, am I that guy? Do I see that because that's me, and I'm seeing a reflection of me in that person? Okay? But as we go through, we talked about these 3 points, which is what I wanted to get through today, because next week we're going to talk about David's response. Okay? But what I wanted us to kind of get thinking about is, hey, how can I see myself in David? And those are just three ways. There's many different ways we can probably see ourselves in that spot. But if I can see myself in these 3 ways, then what we can do is say, hey, as we talk about his response, it's even more impressive with how he responds and why he is given that moniker of being a man after God's own heart. Okay? And that would help us. All right, I'll give you the last word, and otherwise we can stop class there. But I'll pick up right here, and we'll talk about, we'll get in next week about David's response once he's confronted. For next week's class, if you want, read Psalm 51. That is David's psalm after he committed to sin with Bathsheba. That would be, help us, frame that thought in our mind for class next week. I appreciate your participation. Thank you much.